Jaya Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivardhari Yashodanandana Vraja Jana Ranjana Yashodanandana Vraja Jana Ranjana Yamuna Tira Vanachari Yamuna Tira Vanachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Gopi Janna Vallabha Girivardhari Jaya Gopi Janna Vallabha Girivardhari Yashodanandana Vraja Jana Ranjana Yashodanandana Vraja Jana Ranjana Yamuna Tira Vanachari Yamuna Tira Vanachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Iskon Guruvindi Ki Prabhupada Ki Grantaraj Srimad Bhagavatam Ki Tagore Premanande. You want the Vaishnav calendar today? So first of all, reading from Sri Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, Nectar of Devotion. This chapter is entitled The Purity of Devotional Service. So I'm not sure this marker is in the middle of a paragraph. I'm just going to read it anyway. If we read it before, then Prabhupada said, repetition is the mother of learning. In the fifth canto of Srimad Bhagavatam, it is clearly stated by Rishabhdev to his sons, persons engaged in fruitive activities are repeatedly accepting birth and death until they develop a loving feeling for Vasudev. There will be no question of getting out from these stringent laws of material nature. As such, any person who is very seriously engaged in his occupational duties in the varnas and ashrams and who does not develop love for the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Vasudev, should be understood to be simply spoiling his human form of life. Does anybody know that verse that she's referring to? Dharma svanushtita pimsham vishakshena yuktasayat notpadayed yadiratim shrama evahi kevalam. So it's from the 11th canto, if I remember rightly. And basically it says Dharma Svanusita Sham. So one's occupational duties, Dharma, are Shrama Eva Hi Kevalam, only so much useless labor, if they do not provoke, if they do not provoke attraction for the personality of Godhead. So doing our duty is a very clear message, but we have to remember, why we're doing the duty. Not that we simply become duty bound without knowing the purpose behind it, and therefore sometimes we lose sight of the goal because we're doing something which is taking us to the goal, but we forget. It's just like, say, you're driving somewhere and you get bored of the journey and you decide, oh, I don't like this journey, I'm just going back. You forgot you were actually going somewhere really good and interesting that you wanted to go in the first place. So let's not take our eyes off the goal, eyes off the prize. So this is confirmed also in the 11th canto, Srimad Bhagavatam, 11th chapter, verse 32, in which the Lord says to Uddhava, my dear Uddhava, any person who takes shelter of me in complete surrender and follows my instructions, giving up all occupational duties, is to be considered the first-class man. In this statement of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, it is understood that people who are generally attracted to philanthropic, ethical, moral, altruistic, political, and social welfare activities may be considered nice men only in the calculation of the material world. From Srimad Bhagavatam and other authentic Vedic scriptures, we learn further that if a person simply acts in Krishna consciousness and discharges devotional service, he is considered to be far, far better situated than all of those persons engaged in philanthropic, ethical, moral, altruistic, and social welfare activities. So there's more of this coming up. And there was a few occasions where Prabhupada was approached by devotees, and not that Krishna consciousness is immoral, but they had some moral consideration, which was not having a devotional consideration in it. And Prabhupada said that they're simply a mundane moralist. So we see this is what's been spoken about here. We have to understand the higher principle, otherwise we may get caught up in mundane morals. And then when mundane morals comes in, then judgmentalism can come in. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Reading from Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 7, Chapter 7, text number 53. This chapter is called What Prahlad Learned in the Womb. Tato Haro Bhagavati. Tato Haro Bhagavati. Bhaktim Kuruta Danava. Bhaktim Kuruta Danava. Atmopamyena Sarvatra. Atmopamyena Sarvatra. Sarva Bhutatmanishware. Sarva Bhutatmanishware. Tato Haro Bhagavati. Bhaktim Kuruta Danava. Atmopamyena Sarvatra. Sarva Bhutatmanishware. Tato Haro Bhagavati. Bhaktim Kuruta Danava. Atmopamyena Sarvatra. Sarva Bhutatmanishware. Tato Haro Bhagavati. Bhaktim Kuruta Danava. Atmopamyena Sarvatra. Sarva Bhutatmanishware. And the ladies like to try. Tata. Therefore, Haro, unto Lord Hari, Bhagavati, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Bhaktim, devotional service, Kuruta, execute, Danava, O my dear friends, O sons of demons, Atma Opam Yena, just as one's own self, Sarvatra, everywhere, Sarvabhuta Atmani, who is situated as the soul and the supersoul of all living entities. Ishvare, unto the Supreme Lord, the Controller. Translation, my dear friends, O sons of the demons, in the same favourable way that one sees himself and takes care of himself, take to devotional service to satisfy the Supreme Personality of Godhead, who is present everywhere as the supersoul of all living entities. Please repeat, my dear friends, O sons of the demons, in the same favourable way that one sees himself and takes care of himself, take to devotional service to satisfy the Supreme Personality of Godhead, who is present everywhere as the supersoul of all living entities. Srila Prabhupada's purport. The word Atmo Pamyena refers to thinking others to be like oneself. One can very intelligently conclude that without devotional service, without becoming Krishna conscious, one cannot be happy. Therefore, the duty of all devotees is to preach Krishna consciousness everywhere, all over the world, because all living entities without Krishna consciousness are suffering the pangs of material existence. To preach Krishna consciousness is the best welfare activity. Indeed, it is described by Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu as para-upakar, work for the true benefit of others. The activities of para-upakar have been especially entrusted to those who have taken birth in India as human beings. Bharata Bhumiti Hoila Manusya Janmajar Janma Sartaka Kari Kara para-upakar CC Adi 941. The entire world is suffering for want of Krishna consciousness. Therefore, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu advised all human beings born in India to make their lives perfect by Krishna consciousness, and then preach the gospel of Krishna consciousness all over the world, so that others may become happy by executing the principles of Krishna consciousness. Om Jnana Timrandasya Jnana Salakaya Chakshurmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Bakam Karoti Vachalam Pangam Lagate Girim Yakipatamam Bande Shri Girim Dinitaranam Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shri Vasadi Gaura Bhaktivinoda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Ram 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 Hare Hare. So here Prahlad Maharaj is giving his friends, he addresses them as sons of demons, but he's not considering them demons himself. And just as much as a Brahma Bandhu, sometimes it was an insult, kind of Vedic insult, is to call someone a Brahma Bandhu, that they're not actually Brahmin. but they're just simply a friend of a Brahmin, which doesn't make them a Brahmin. So these friends of Prahlad, although they were born into a demonic family, he didn't consider them to be demons. And this is also explained in Bhagavad Gita by Krishna, where he talks about the Varnashram system, and the qualifications are by guna and karma, by one's qualities and by one's activities. So there are examples of people taking birth in demonic families who have become devotees. Can anyone give an example they know of? Who comes to mind? Someone who was born in a demoniac family becomes a devotee. Yourself? That's good. It's nice that devotees consider themselves a devotee. Fine devotee. I remember Bhagwan Prabhu gave a class, and he said, when you're faced with activities which are not devotee activities or devotee mood, then just think, no, I'm a devotee, I don't do that. A devotee doesn't do that. So we're aspiring to be a devotee, and we're trying to behave like a devotee. So apart from yourself, can anyone say who was born in a demoniac family without criticizing their parents? Bali Maharaj, yeah. He was, yeah, Karam was. Prahlad Maharaj, yeah. And you were going to say Prahlad Maharaj. Who? Vritasura, yeah. And then also, there may have been people born in a devotee family who weren't devotees. Can anyone think of any examples? Again, Madai. They were born as Brahmins and they had every good opportunity, but through bad association, they became demonic. And Prabhupada mentions that even if one is born in a good family, if you get bad association, then you can become affected by that. So our guna and our karma there's this age-old question of nature or nurture. So even if one has a certain nature, if you associate with those of a higher nature or a better nature, then you can take on those qualities. And we're all the examples of that. We're all getting the association of Srila Prabhupada through his books, through his disciples, through all the devotees, through all the activities that has been given to us. And therefore, we are distancing ourselves, as Krishna recommends in Bhagavad Gita, keep all abominable activities far distant by devotional service. So by engaging in devotional service, we're keeping abominable activities away. The problem is that people in this world don't know what is an abominable activity. What is normal to them is considered abominable according to the true standard of a human being's life. Human beings are not simply meant to eat, sleep, mate, and defend in a polished way. So Prabhupada gives us example that the animal is running on 4 legs and we're running on 4 wheels, sometimes 2 wheels. And the human being, they have to get a big elaborate arrangement for eating and sleeping and mating, whereas the animals, they're doing the same activity, but they don't make a big elaborate arrangement, so you wonder who's actually got the better life. And sometimes you see people saying that, or my cat or my dog gets to stay at home all day and watch the telly while I got to go and work. If there's reincarnation, I wouldn't mind being a dog in my next life. But such ignorance, because the dog's life is not great either, apart from the fact that it's short. Then there's many dogs who don't have such a comfortable life. And why, out of ignorance, people aspire for something like, often I've heard people say, no, if there's reincarnation, I'd like to come back as a bird, fly in the sky, free. That's okay until you land on the ground to get something to eat, and then you're watching over your shoulder to see who's going to pounce on you. And then the cat comes, and the bird flies away. Cat's feeling proud of itself. And then the dog comes, and then the cat runs off. Then the owner comes, the owner of the cat comes. What are you doing chasing my cat? So everybody is experiencing this eating, sleeping, fearing, and mating. Sometimes Prabhupada explains defending as fearing. Fear is always underlying. Often it's a motivator in this world. And sometimes even in devotional service, fear of the consequences of not keeping up our Krishna consciousness. We've been awakened to the consequences of material life, and even if it requires that fear is a motivating factor to begin with, then let it be. It won't always be fear. The main thing really we have to develop is love for Krishna. That should be our motivating factor. But Krishna welcomes everybody, whatever their motivation may be to begin with, whether they want something, want nothing, want liberation, want devotional service. Then Krishna says, by all means, then approach me. Kama sarva kama va moksha kama udaradi. Tivrine bhakti yogena sapam purisham param. So this is the invitation from Krishna that, okay, whatever your situation is, just come to me. You may not come with the correct motivation to begin with, and you might not even be aware of that. It might take months, it might take years before you realize actually I've been motivated all along. But whatever it takes, if it takes months, years, decades, then we realize that it's a realization we haven't had for many, many births, countless births. Sometimes we don't feel like we're making much advancement ourselves, but we can see it in others. You can see if we see someone coming along, they look a bit tanned out, they look a bit scruffy, or they're full of themselves, or whatever happens to be in the conditioning or state that they arrive in. I don't think we need to look at anybody. We can look at ourselves first. Then, but if you look at somebody, and after a short period of time, you see that they're changing, the process is working. We forget that it's working on us as well. No, we're not some kind of special living entity that the process of devotion service doesn't work on. Of course, it is a willing process. We may be engaged in the process and maybe not even so willing at times, but engage in it anyway, because the purification will come. And if we're finding ourselves being mechanical, then just pray to the deities that we can actually develop some genuine affection and perform our devotional service willingly. So one of the main points here is that Prahlad Maharaj is saying, in the same favourable way that one sees himself and takes care of himself, take the devotional service to satisfy the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So the material basis, the principle of material existence is what? I'm sure whatever answer you give, it will probably be right or part right. Anybody like to say? Envy? Yep. That is the primary cause. And that causes us to rather be absorbed in Krishna. It causes us I, me, and mine. Yep. This is the basis of material existence, I, me, and mine. And in first canto, Srila Prabhupada says that the first principle of spiritual life is nirmama, nothing is mine. So we're doing a complete 180 degrees turnaround. So right from the very starting line, Prabhupada says, okay, you want to take the spiritual life, then first of all, understand nothing is yours. And if you can accept that, and it's very easy to understand that, isn't it? Even this body is not ours. It's on loan. We don't know how long it's going to be. We don't know how long we're going to be in this. We had previous bodies, which we thought was us. Now we think this is us again. It'd be quite interesting if we got, some kind of photograph of how we looked before. We might think, oh, that was better. I want that one back. Dig it up. So this is easily understood because we come into this world with nothing and we leave with nothing. And in the midst of that, there's a devotee called Peter Burwash. He was a world champion tennis player back in the 70s and 80s. He gives talks in Vrindavan, inspirational speaker. And he wrote a book called Become the Master of Your Dash. So dash doesn't mean dash anu dash. Does anyone know that term dash, what it means? Yeah, so usually if you go to a cemetery, you'll see here lies such and such, 1896 to 1977. So that in between those dates is the dash. So what you're going to do with that dash, that is your life. So to become the master of a dash, to understand that we are actually in control of our destiny. Maybe not so much as in control of what we did before and the reactions we're having to experience now. We're in control of how we accept those reactions. And the mood of a devotee is to think, I've done so much wrong. Whatever I'm getting now is Krishna's mercy. It's simply a token reaction. I should be getting more. Sometimes we forget that. We think, well, I'm a devotee. Why I have to suffer? It's not because we want to become free from suffering. But we do have to wait until we don't have a material body, because as long as we have a material body, suffering is there. There's no way around it. But Krishna gives us some hope. He teaches us, he tells us to learn to tolerate. So from aham mameti, I, me and mine, to nirmama, nothing is mine. So that takes a bit of time before we really learn that, because as soon as something comes into our possession, we become the proprietor of it. And even sometimes this can be useful in our devotional service, because we have that proprietorship tendency. Then sometimes devotees will engage us and give us some Prabhu Datta Desh, or some project, or some responsibility where we can make it ours, because, as Prabhupada also reminds us, that proprietorship turns sand into gold. Just like, I think it was Mother Devaki recently was here, and she was talking about the Sankirtan vehicles. So in ISKCON, Karuna Bhavan is not so bad. It's also not so great in that term, in that sense, but we could be better. But if a devotee has a car which they're responsible for, generally they look after it properly. And when, like Devaki Mataji was saying, when she was in charge of the Sankirtan vehicle, she was told it was hers, then she made sure that nobody left a mess in it, looked after it very nicely. So the mood of a devotee, we shouldn't have to really be kind of coerced into thinking falsely that something is ours, so we look after it nicely. We should think, well, it's Krishna's, I should look after it even more nice than I would look after it if it was mine. If it was mine, I probably wouldn't look after it so well, but it's Krishna's. It's non-different for, he's given us this for our service. We should treat it with great care. There was one time we had, before we opened up the temple here, we'd come up from down south. It was 1984, and we stayed for about 9 months or something in a motorhome over on the east coast of Edinburgh, near Addington, Monksmuir Caravan Park. Monksmuir was an interesting name for it. And there was so there's a bunch of us living in the motorhome, and every day we were going out doing Sankirtan. And when we got up in the morning, we'd have the whole morning program there, go out in Sankirtan, come back, read and chant, go to bed, and then Sunday we'd have a Sunday program there. So it had become so much spiritualized that when we had to sell it, we were thinking, oh, how can we sell this motorhome? It's effulgent. You know, in our eyes, it was like a spiritual energy. It was like Chintamani. They say the spiritual world is built of Chintamani. So it was like that because the Lord's energy are such that he can make anything material spiritual. And it's spiritual by seeing it as Tadiya in relation to the Supreme Lord. So just as we try to treat the facilities, the objects which are given to us in devotional service, we also have to treat the devotees with great care and respect. And sometimes we don't always do that, but we have to try to learn from our mistakes so we can improve on it. As we said earlier, we didn't join perfect. No offense for any incognito Paramahamsas who are simply here to deliver the Kali Yuga specimens. But generally, we don't come as a pure devotee, we come with some baggage. We have to remember that we are also being tolerated. We're not the only one that has to tolerate. We have to tolerate. And if we think, we're not the ones who have to tolerate, we have to be tolerated. And if we're honest with ourselves, we would think, well, actually, the devotees have quite a job having to tolerate me. I would find it difficult. So Prahlad Maharaj, he was very enthused by these sons of demons becoming devotees. And because they were sons of demons, there was no great expectation upon them. So therefore, when they became devotees, then he was so enlivened. And I was just reading, Srila Prabhupada was saying, I think it was this morning I was reading, he said that in a letter to, I can't remember, but he was basically saying, in the Western world, the boys and girls are doing such great service preaching Krishna consciousness. He says, ordinarily, traditionally, the woman doesn't go out and do these things. She's not expected to. But in the West, because everyone is more or less equal, and the ladies are taking up the same role, and he was so grateful and impressed by what they were doing. And he gave them full encouragement and empowerment to do that. Here also he's saying something which is more or less an obligation for those born in India, that they are, the verse is, Bharata Bhumite Haila Manusya Janmajar. So Bharat is India, and Bhumi is obviously the earth planet. So on this earth planet, the land of India, Bharat, Haila Manusya Janmajar, those who have taken birth there, Janma Sartaka Kari Kara Para Upakar, becomes their duty just simply by taking birth there. It's a pious birth. But to make that pious birth, to take the best advantage of it, then they must take upon this duty of spreading Krishna consciousness to those who are suffering due to lack of Krishna consciousness. So that subject of upakar was also being mentioned in the Nectar of Devotion there. So para upakar, so kara means to do something, upa means to do something uplifting. Like this word upper comes from the word upar. It means elevating or higher. Just like if you were to tell someone something, and I'm not much with Hindi or Bijbasi, but the word upar would mean, I remember I was at Kusum Sarovar and asked where something was, and Mataji says upar, which meant up at the top where the other mandir was, and I realized upar means like upper. So this upakar means activities we're going to elevate, and para upakar means supremely elevating activities. So this Krishna consciousness is the highest welfare. So therefore Lord Chaitanya says, Chetodarpan Marjanam Bhav Mahadavagni Nirvapanam Shrekareva Chandrakavitarnam Vidyavadajivanam. So he's saying that this is the highest welfare work for all living entities. Bhaktivinoda Thakur said the highest welfare work for all living entities is to, does anybody know that quote? Is to loudly snore during class. Or is to loudly take prasadam in the assembly of devotees. Or is to loudly read when everyone else is trying to read silently. To loudly chant the holy name of the Lord, Bhaktivinoda Thakur says, is the highest welfare. So So therefore, the devotees, they could sit here and chant all day long and benefit themselves and go back to Godhead. Maybe. But the way to get the mercy of the Lord, which is surely going to take us back to Godhead, is to give Krishna consciousness to others. Because the more we give, the more we get. That is the nature of spiritual life. So just as one takes care of oneself, this aham mameti, I, me and mine, was self-absorbed. We never forget ourselves, do we? This is what Prabhupada says, what is the most important principle of Krishna consciousness? Does anybody remember what he said? Yeah, I was thinking of another thing. He did. And this is how one saves oneself, to always and never. Yep. So this is the highest for work. To save ourselves is to always remember Krishna and never forget Krishna. And Prabhupada said of all the regulative principles, chanting the 16 rounds is the most important, because this is the easiest way to remember Krishna, is to chant his name, and then this is the highest welfare work we can do for ourselves. On top of that, when we give that to others, then we get so many bonus points. And Prabhupada said also in Scotland, that when you give Krishna consciousness, when you're preaching Krishna consciousness in Scotland, you get twice the benefit, because it's so austere up here. We don't think it's austere. Yeah, we do. But there's going to be austerities wherever you go. And Prabhupada, he was very grateful, and he glorified the devotees. He said to Tribhuvanath, I enjoyed my stay in Scotland, and I would like to go again. And this was in June. And he says, but it was a bit cold. He says, but for you, this is nothing. It's just something on the skin. So Prabhupada is very much appreciating the devotees were doing these austerities, taking cold bath in the morning and going out on the cold streets. And facing people who often didn't want anything to do with what they were offering, or sometimes were antagonistic or hostile. So when we give our human form of life to Krishna's service, especially our youth, the tendency in the youth is we have so much capacity to enjoy. Just like these young demon friends of Prahlad Maharaj, they had so much capacity to enjoy, but they were becoming devotees. So when we sacrifice our youth, or whatever years we have, some of us were able to join when we were young, and some join when they're older. And we always think it's easier for the other side. We think, well, if only I joined when I was older, I'd be burnt out by now. It'd be easier. And then the older person's thinking, if only I joined when I was younger, I'd be much more fixed up by now. But everyone's got their own austerities, and everyone has to prove their devotion to Krishna. So we make the best use of whatever bargain we have. Prabhupada says, even at best, the material body is a bad bargain. What to speak of, we have some ailments, whether it's physical, mental, whatever, happens to be causing us some trouble in this world. So Prabhupada, being compassionate, he was concerned for the suffering of the living entities. This is the mood of Lord Chaitanya, that one way to be less selfish is to consider the wishes of another, which is Supreme Lord, Guru and Krishna, and to consider that others are suffering more than we are. And even sometimes it appears that they're not suffering now, but what they're doing now is leading to suffering. Like, you can't, with the knowledge we have, you see someone walking down the street drunk, eating a hamburger, smoking a cigarette, you can't say that they're going back to Godhead. You know that their life is very auspicious. They don't know. They're in such ignorance. They don't know what they're doing is. It's going to cause them suffering later on in this life, if not now. So enjoyment in the mode of ignorance means suffering now, and suffering later. So this is called Maya, that we take our enjoyment, we take our suffering to be enjoyment. And the example is given very clearly that the camel is chewing the thorns, thinking these thorns are very juicy, very tasty. And what is he tasting? He's tasting his own blood. So this is exactly our plight in the material world. When we try to enjoy, we're simply enjoying our own demise. I remember before I joined the temple, when I just started to read, I can't remember if it was just starting to read Prabhupada's books or just becoming more introspective at that time. But I was taking shelter in intoxication, etc., and I was thinking that, what am I doing here? This is not making life any better. It's not making my problems in life any easier. All I'm doing is dumbing myself down and making it more difficult to deal with. And at one point, I thought, well, perhaps actually just being free from all this thing would give me better capacity to see what the problems are and what are the opportunities, what are the solutions. Feeling tied down with work, a group of friends which actually were not good association, I realized I don't have to do any of this. We can walk out of this at any time, especially when you come across Prabhupada's books, you realize there is another life, there's another world. So this Parupakar has been especially entrusted to those who have taken birth in India as human beings. And it's entrusted to us also. Many of us haven't taken birth as in India, but now that we're aware of Krishna consciousness, it becomes also our duty to take this to other people. It's not simply that it's only the Indians have to be concerned with it. They have a special duty because they're born in the land which is considered the land of piety. But nowadays we look at it and we see that they're also competing with the West, so much so. Like previously it used to be worldwide known, this term sacred cow. It's untouchable, doesn't matter what it does. It can come into your shop and steal all your produce, knock everything over, but you can't harm it. The cow was sacred. And people lived like that. But in due course of time, due to the desire to be like the West, then one of their goals was to be the biggest exporter of beef in the world. And that is, completely diametrically opposed to this verse as being the land of piety. But still, the remnants of Vedic culture, Vedic civilization are there, where we see that very quickly people can be convinced that what they consider was mythology actually is reality. Srila Prabhupada explained that due to a poor fund of knowledge, then they don't understand the conclusion. But when they get that proper fund of knowledge, then it all makes sense to them. And we see that Krishna consciousness is spreading like wildfire in India. So when the movement started off, it spread like wildfire in America. Prabhupada's personal input certainly motivated that, and then spread to Europe and different parts of the world. And at some point, Australia became leading book distributors. And at another point, it became Italy. Then it was UK. And in due course of time, the communist regime collapsed, and then the spread of Krishna consciousness was very much in the USSR and former USSR countries. And now it's spreading like wildfire in India. So devotees have to know the full story, the full history, and not think, okay, now we're all fired up and there's nothing much happening there. We have to see that, the Supreme Lord is spreading his movement throughout the whole world, and have mutual appreciation for each other's efforts in devotional service. But Srila Prabhupada here is especially encouraging those who are born in India that they have this duty to take up Krishna consciousness and spread it all over the world. So just as the materialist thinks of themselves and even their extended self in terms of friends, family, society, nation, etc., then similarly we transform that consciousness to, instead of being self-centered, to be Krishna-centered. And by transferring that self-centeredness, then we can do ourselves some real good. And automatically we get benefited, just like we mentioned in the previous class, that one old man told me his secret to being happy was that he thought of himself, the less he thought of himself, the better. So we have that, but we also have the positive aspect that the more we think of Krishna, we think of Krishna's desires, the desires of the spiritual master. If we've been given some duty, we do that. And this is how we learn to transcend it, regardless of whether we feel happy or whether we feel sad or distressed or depressed. We carry on with the duty. And this is how we transcend the thinking, feeling, and willing, these three traits of the mind. To transcend the mind means that we have to do or given transcendental duty, regardless of what comes. And this will make us strong in Krishna consciousness. Because we invite the blessings of the Guru Parampara. And in Kali Yuga, there's different ways one can get liberation. Sadhana Siddhi is one, but Kripa Siddhi in Kali Yuga is especially important. So to get Kripa Siddhi, to be perfect sadhaka in Kali Yuga is very difficult. Even to get that, you need a lot of Kripa, a lot of mercy. So we have to have this balance of having good sadhana and obtaining the mercy of Guru and Krishna and the Vaishnavas. So just before we open up for questions, then just like Dhruva Maharaj, he got the mercy of Narada Muni. He went to the forest to meditate as he'd heard in the court of his father, the king. And what was Dhruva Maharaj's father's name? Maharaja Tanapad. So he'd heard the sages speaking about going to the forest to find Vishnu. So when he felt insulted by his stepmother, he decided he was going to the forest to find Vishnu to get a benediction, which material benediction. He wanted some kingdom greater than the Lord Brahma. So by his austerities, he was creating some difficulties within the universe. And when Narada Muni was speaking with Lord Vishnu, he said he wants your darshan, and he said, whose disciple is he? Now it's not that Vishnu doesn't know anything, but he knows everything. Vishnu is all pervasive. That's what it means. He's everywhere. So it's not that he didn't know, but he wanted to make this point. So he asked Narada Muni, whose disciple is he? And he said, oh, he's my disciple. And then Vishnu says, okay, I will come then. So by the mercy of Narada Muni, his disciple Dhruva Maharaj got the darshan of Lord Vishnu. So this Kripa Siddhi is very important. We please the devotee of the Lord, then the Lord will be pleased with us. And this is also in the Guruvastic. The spiritual master is pleased when the devotees follow the regulative principles. Okay, we'll just stop there at this point. I won't get any questions or comments. No? Okay, good. Iskon Guruvanda ki, Srila Prabhupada ki, Srimad Bhagavatam ki,
Hari Bo. His Grace Prabhupada Prana ki.